There's a lie most people believe their entire lives. A quiet lie. A psychological illusion. It goes like this. Certain people know exactly how to push my buttons. They say one sentence, one tone, one little comment, and suddenly your entire nervous system is on fire. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts replaying the moment like a broken recording. You imagine arguments you never said. Perfect responses that arrive 3 hours too late. You feel the anger, the embarrassment, the urge to prove yourself. And it feels like they did that to you. Like they reached inside your mind and pressed a hidden switch. Like they have an access code to your emotions. For a long time, I believed that too. I believed certain people had power over me. That some personalities were just naturally irritating. That some insults were impossible to ignore. That anger was automatic, just a reflex, like touching a hot stove. You don't choose pain, it just happens. But that belief is wrong. And the moment you see why it's wrong, your entire relationship with conflict changes. Because here's the uncomfortable truth nobody teaches you. When someone makes you angry, they didn't do it. You did. Not consciously, not intentionally, but internally. And the moment you understand how that process works, you stop being emotionally programmable. You stop being the puppet. And suddenly, the people who used to control your reactions lose their script. Let's slow this down. Think about the last time someone really bothered you. Maybe they dismissed your opinion. Maybe they made a sarcastic comment. Maybe they said something that felt disrespectful. You remember the moment, the heat rising, that tightening in your throat, the sudden pressure in your chest. Your mind immediately begins constructing a defense. Who do they think they are? They don't understand me. I should have said this instead. And for the next hour, maybe the next day, you carry that moment around with you, replaying it, analyzing it, rewriting it. But here's the question most people never stop to ask. What actually happened in reality? Not in your mind, not in your interpretation, in pure objective terms. What happened? Someone made sounds. Sound waves traveled through the air. They touched your eardrum. Your brain translated them into words. That's it. That's the entire physical event. Everything else, the anger, the humiliation, the defensiveness, the urge to retaliate, that came from something else. Your interpretation. The story your mind instantly told about what those words meant. And here's the part that changes everything once you see it. Emotions don't come directly from events. They come from the meaning you assign to events. There's always a hidden step in between. Event, interpretation, emotion. But most people skip that middle step completely. They go straight from, they said something, to, I'm furious, without realizing the real trigger was the story in the middle. And once you understand that, you realize something almost shocking. You're not reacting to people. You're reacting to your interpretation of them. Let me show you something simple. Two drivers get cut off in traffic. Exact same event. Exact same situation. Driver A immediately thinks, this guy disrespected me. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks he can push me around. Now, driver A is furious, gripping the steering wheel, talking out loud, replaying the moment, maybe even chasing the other car for a few blocks. Now, driver B sees the same event, but the story's different. Driver B thinks, maybe he didn't see me. Maybe he's rushing somewhere. Maybe he's just a bad driver. 20 seconds later, driver B forgets it ever happened. Same event, two completely different emotional worlds. So who actually controlled their emotion? The driver who cut them off, or the story they told themselves? Once you see this clearly, a strange realization begins to form. Most anger is built on a hidden assumption. An assumption about what something means about you. Someone insults you. Why does it hurt? Because somewhere inside you wonder, what if they're right? Someone dismisses your idea. Why does it sting? Because part of you fears, maybe I'm not as capable as I thought. Anger often appears as defense, but psychologically, it's usually protection against doubt, which explains something fascinating. If a 5-year-old walks up to you and says, "You're stupid," do you feel angry? Of course not. Why? Because their opinion carries zero weight in your mind. You don't believe them, so there's nothing to defend. But if someone you respect says the exact same thing, now it lands differently. Now your mind reacts. Why? Because you gave their opinion authority. And that's the moment power changes hands. Because the moment someone's opinion becomes important to your identity, they gain influence over your emotions. But here's the good news. The same power you gave them, you can take back. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote a line in his personal journal that captured this perfectly. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. He wasn't saying ignore reality. He wasn't saying pretend insults don't exist. He was pointing to something deeper. You decide what has authority over your peace. Not them, you. But when people hear this idea, they often misunderstand it. They think the solution is to stop caring about anything, to become emotionally numb, detached, cold. But that's another prison. Going from too reactive to completely shut down. That isn't freedom. Real freedom is different. You still care, you still feel, you're still human, but your emotions aren't controlled by strangers. You're not handing your inner stability to someone else and hoping they treat it gently. You keep it. Which leads to a surprising truth about anger. Most people think anger is strength. They think reacting proves confidence. They think staying calm means you're weak. But psychologically, the opposite is true. When someone provokes you and you explode, you prove they reached your center. But when someone provokes you and nothing happens, you prove something much more powerful. They never had access in the first place. And that realization changes the entire game. Because the strongest position you can occupy in any conflict is not domination, not retaliation, not winning the argument. It's something much quieter, unmovable clarity. But here's where things get interesting. The people who trigger you the most are rarely random. There's always a pattern hiding underneath. And once you start paying attention to that pattern, you discover something uncomfortable. The person who angers you the most is often pointing at something inside you that hasn't healed yet. And that realization changes everything. We'll get into that next. Part 2. The mirror you keep fighting. Remember the idea we ended with. The people who trigger you the most usually aren't random. They're mirrors. Not perfect mirrors, but emotional mirrors. Because every insult needs something to attach to, a hook. If there's no hook, the insult falls to the floor. Imagine someone calling you incompetent. If deep down you know your skill, your work, your preparation, you might find it annoying, but it won't shake you. Why? Because there's no internal agreement, no hidden doubt. But if someone says the same thing, and a small part of you fears it might be true, now it lands differently. Now the words grab something inside you. Now the reaction begins. Which leads to a strange psychological rule. The intensity of your reaction often reveals the depth of your insecurity. That's not an insult, it's information. If someone calls you lazy and you explode, maybe part of you worries you haven't lived up to your potential. If someone calls you selfish and you feel defensive, maybe part of you fears that perception. But if someone accuses you of something you know with certainty is false, you barely react. It feels irrelevant. Which means anger isn't always about what someone said. It's about the internal tension between their accusation and your uncertainty. Once you see that clearly, conflict starts looking very different. Instead of asking, "Why are they attacking me?" you begin asking, "Why did that bother me so much?" And suddenly, every emotional reaction becomes data, not about them, about you. Your unresolved fears, your hidden insecurities, your ego's pressure points. And the ego hates this realization because the ego believes anger equals strength. It whispers things like, if you don't react, they'll think you're weak. You have to defend yourself. You can't let people talk to you like that. But the ego has a very specific agenda. It wants to be right more than it wants peace. It wants validation more than it wants clarity. It wants victory more than it wants freedom. And when you start observing your reactions instead of obeying them, the ego loses control. This doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect, not at all. Calm doesn't mean passive. Calm means purposeful. Someone crosses a line, you can set a boundary. Calmly. Someone disrespects you repeatedly, you can walk away. Calmly. Someone insults you in a meeting, you can address it directly. Calmly. The difference is simple but profound. Reactive behavior tries to win the moment. Calm clarity protects your peace. And peace is the real victory. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, something fascinating happens. People who rely on provoking others suddenly lose their power. They're used to pushing buttons, getting reactions, seeing anger, seeing emotional chaos. That's how they measure influence. But when nothing happens, they feel confused. Some escalate, trying harder, others back off. Either way, you remain centered. And that's real power. Not dominating the room, not silencing people, but remaining unmoved in situations designed to shake you. And the practice that builds this power is surprisingly simple. The next time someone bothers you, pause. Just 3 seconds. 3 seconds before you respond. 3 seconds before you defend yourself. 3 seconds before your mouth moves. In those 3 seconds, ask one question. Is this about me or about them? Most of the time, the answer becomes obvious. People project constantly. Their insecurity, their frustration, their stress, their unresolved pain, and whoever happens to be nearby becomes the target. Once you see that clearly, anger dissolves before it forms, because you realize something important. They weren't attacking who you are. They were revealing who they are. And when you understand that, your emotional center becomes difficult to disturb. Over time, something else changes too. You stop needing things from people. You stop needing constant agreement, constant validation, constant understanding. Because you realize those things never defined you in the first place. Your identity stops depending on external reactions. And when that happens, ironically, people start respecting you more. Because the person who doesn't chase validation appears grounded. The person who doesn't defend themselves constantly appears confident. The person who remains calm in chaos appears powerful. Not loud power, not aggressive power, quiet power. The kind that comes from inner stability. Which leads to the final realization. Peace isn't something the world gives you. Peace is something you protect internally. Every time you refuse to react impulsively, you strengthen that protection. Every time you observe your anger instead of obeying it, you reclaim a little more control. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You begin moving through life differently. Situations that used to ruin your day barely register. People who used to provoke you lose their effect. Conflict still exists, but it no longer controls your mind state, because you finally understand something most people never realize. Your emotions are real, but they are not commands. They are signals, and signals can be observed, examined, questioned, and sometimes ignored. Which means the next time someone tries to push your buttons, remember something important. They never actually had the button. You handed it to them, and you can take it back. The moment you stop believing their words define you, the moment you stop defending every opinion, the moment you choose clarity over reaction, something powerful appears. Not dominance, not indifference, something deeper, unshakable peace. The kind no insult can steal, the kind no argument can destroy, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else behaving perfectly, because it comes from the one place nobody else can reach. Inside you. And once you learn to live from that place, you realize something simple. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. It's the one who cannot be provoked.